welcome, guys. We are talking about the gap and the gain. What do you guys think of this one?
I liked it. I thought it was really good. It was funny that introduction's like 40 minutes long. Did you guys notice that?
I did not notice because I thought it was fantastic, apparently.
It was so good. And I feel like after the introduction is a little like repetitive, but the introduction was so good.
I
I
must
I read
need
it this time,
repetition.
so that's why I was like, how many pages is
Oh,
it?
yeah, I need to get the hard copy. I thought it was a perfect book to come on the heels of all the Arbinger books that we read. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It felt like it was like those same kinds of principles in just slightly different ways.
Well,
So
I've been feeling that too with a lot of the books. Like they're they're the same concept, but they're telling it in a different way because we all learn differently, right? So it works for certain people more than other
totally,
people. So you have to find the book that works best for you. But this one was awesome. So
it was good. Yeah, and for some reason, it was a lot easier for me to just be able to like freely share it with my husband. I don't know why, but I was
You
just like,
got him
oh
to
my
read
gosh.
it?
He started listening to some of it. I don't know if he's gotten all the way through it, but yeah, it just came like I was working outside one day and listening to it, and I came in and I'm like, oh my gosh, you totally need to listen to this. So good. And then I was applying it to things that were going on with him and his work and whatever. And I'm like, you totally need to listen to this. It'd be so helpful.
I think everybody could benefit.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you
Hey,
guys don't
well,
care,
sorry, Austin.
I was gonna start with maybe a couple questions that would answer. Does that
Yeah,
sound all right?
that sounds great.
Cool. So obviously the first three that I had, I got before I started the book. I was like, all right, what is the gap?
Hmm.
Right? And then what is the gain? Like that was
Those are good
before I ever
questions.
started.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
okay, the gap and the gain, right? And then in relation to the gap, how do we get out? So maybe that's a good place to start.
So those were your three before you
Those were my
started.
three before I started.
Okay.
So I figured they wanted you to get out of the gap, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The gain and the gap.
So
Yeah.
so what is the gap?
It's
What was it?
I should have maybe like refreshed on it before this because I've been done with it for a couple of weeks now. So, but for me, the gap is like anywhere that you fall kind of like victim to what I call the me monster, where you just start to worry a lot more about yourself than like maybe a situation would warrant.
So I was refreshing too because I read it weeks ago as well. But the way I took it, the gap for me was because we all set goals, right? We have these high expectations for ourselves. We have these ideals of what we want our life to look like or the day to go like. And so the gap is
Good
your
way.
idea of that and you not hitting it.
Yeah,
So the
that's a
gap
good way
is
to put it.
like the way that you measure what you actually did. So like, because I'm looking at the book, like the map, or they have the
Yeah, the
printout of it,
picture.
right? So like it's what you actually achieved, and this is what you expected to achieve is the higher portion. And so that's the gap. Like
Okay, yeah, that's a good
the
way to put it.
gap is the in between of what you missed between what you actually achieved and what your ideal was to achieve,
Yeah, so you measure yourself against the ideal rather than the
what you
progress,
actually
right?
achieved.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
So it's the gap in between.
that was one of my most favorite takeaways from the book, actually, when he talked about the horizon and how, like a traveler is always, looking to the horizon, reaching for that horizon, especially when he talks about like the whole concept of the pursuit of happiness. So if we're always pursuing this this thing that's like out there, seemingly beyond our reach, right? Then we will always feel like we are in what a lot of people call a scarcity mindset. So we're always falling short of that achievement or that goal or that, finish
The
line. Or
gap.
we're always in the gap.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I loved how he described which is so funny because this is how I actually track, like, this is the kind of goal setter I am, is I'm a tracker goal setter. Meaning like I have kind of like these overarching targets, these things that I want to accomplish. And I say like, okay, so I want to, like work out 100 days this year or whatever. So I'll keep track of all those days. And it's just kind of like, so for me, it's kind of easier. And I set those goals based on looking backwards. Like, what am I naturally good at doing? I'm going to set goals for that. Maybe push myself a little bit more, and then I'm going to track it and just see. So you're always looking backwards over your shoulder instead of looking towards that. I mean, it's good to look at the horizon, see where you're going, but then look backwards and say, like, how far have I come? Because sometimes we forget we've really come a long way.
Well, and that's a good segment into Austin's other question was, what is the gain? And the gain is looking back at what you actually achieved, right?
That's true. Yes, that is exactly answering.
Yeah, you would like, they talk about looking backwards rather than what you didn't achieve. I mean, you still achieved something, but you didn't hit the ideal.
Yeah.
Austin, what do you think?
Yeah, he had a really good example in there too of like he gave his toddler like these 5 spoons that she wanted to play with, and then one of his other kids took one of the spoons away, and rather than being excited about the 4 spoons that she had, she was just so mad about the one that she lost, right?
Yeah.
And so that summarizes both the gap and the gain. They're almost in one scenario, right? Like she was in the gap because she's focusing on, that 1 spoon being gone. Where if you were in the gain, you'd focus on the 4 spoons that you didn't have before. It's just an interesting idea. How many times we do that? Like that was an easy one for a toddler, right? But I can think of a lot of scenarios
to our 5th winter that we're experiencing.
I know it's snowing right now at my window. So
yeah, I had to like get the snowblower out again today for like the 8 inches of snow that fell overnight in spring, with April right around the corner. Like, so I try to think this way of just like, what can I be grateful about this? Well, man, we had such a dry winter last year. We're always wanting more precipitation. I've always dreamed about having winter be just like this, where it's like fresh snow all the time. It's so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. So it's like a way to look at things in a positive light, right? Yeah. It's like the toddler. Oh, I have, like, she could really think through this, but I have 4 spoons. Before I had 0. Yay.
Right. Well, and he uses the word ideal a lot, and measuring against ideals, right? So, I'm not a super smart person when, I was like, I know what ideal means, but I don't know the exact definition. When you look it up, it's pretty amazing. I don't know if you guys looked at it.
No,
I didn't look it up.
But it's one's concept of what is perfect, and it exists only in imagination. So it's an interesting verbiage there, how we set this imaginary horizon, right, is how you'd liken it to the book, and how quickly it goes away. And so it's desirable or perfect, but not reality. So how could we be happy if we're trying to measure against that?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, you can't ever be.
I mean, you have to have an ideal of where you want to be, but you can't measure to that at all.
Right.
Like, that's, when you think about it, you realize all the faults you have on yourself of only looking to the ideal and not looking, like, I think of in my business, for example, how far I've come over where I was 5 years ago. And I'm not where I would like to be, right? But I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, look what I've done. Like, that's pretty spectacular. But you don't feel that way because you haven't hit this level. And they also say, like, I mean, so many books, right? You hit that level and you're still not happy because you have a new level.
Because you're pursuing happiness always.
Yeah. So like you're never gonna hit the level if you are only looking at the gap. If you look at the gain of what you've actually accomplished or grown with, then that's where you actually find some happiness in your life.
Right.
So I guess an easy way to say it would be that ideals are for motivation, not for measurement. Is that how you kind of put that.
Did you just
That's
come
a
up with
great
that,
one.
Austin?
Thanks, so.
I would say you're
Like-
super smart then.
No, I don't know about that.
Well, you're a lot smarter than me in a lot of ways. We'll just
Oh,
put
I don't think
it out
so.
there. So
there's
your
another.
ideal is to measure, say that again.
So I would say the ideals are for motivation, not for measurement.
Motivation. Thank you. Okay.
Motivation.
Ideals are for motivation, not for measurement. That is our quote takeaway.
It's a quote
Okay.
takeaway from our book, Level Up Book Club quote.
Yeah, from Austin. We need to make sure that's like Austin's quote.
Oh, there we go.
That's a really great one.
So then when I was, reading through, I came up with another question. And I guess I got thinking, why is it that high achieving people tend to be unhappy? I don't know. You read through the book, and they're like, all of these entrepreneurs, all of these people, they didn't consider themselves super successful, and when you ask them, they tended not to be super happy. What do you think about that?
So you mean like his examples or?
His examples, as well as, so Dan Sullivan, he teaches like strategic coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about all of his examples of having the entrepreneurs in his class. How many of you would say you're very successful? And a lot of their hands wouldn't go up, right? Like
Yeah.
he's dealing with where the minimum bar to get in is if they're profiting over like $250,000, something like that, right? That's the minimum bar to get in. And even still, they don't consider themselves successful.
So that would be interesting though, because he's showing that before the coaching.
Right.
What's the after they learn? Would they consider themselves successful at that point?
They do.
So, and I think that's
it's
why,
natural.
Yeah,
tendency.
I think, yeah, exactly. It's that same thing where you keep like you hit a level and the level moves up. So you're never going to feel successful because the level's always moving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what he called that specifically? I don't know if you remember since it's been a little bit. Do you remember hedonic adaptation?
It sounds familiar, but
I know. Yeah,
I was trying to go through it before we got on the calls.
Oh, you're fine. There's a lot of information in here.
It was a lot.
I read through it like 4 times, I think.
Oh, I need to read through it again. I told myself I need to.
Yeah, I started to listen to it again and didn't make it through again.
Well, the nice thing is it's a super easy read. Like
it is.
It's an easy read. So like if people are, I mean, if you buy the book, okay, I'm going to be honest. If you buy the book, there is like the back part, the end notes and stuff. There's like, what is that going to be? That's like a fifth of the book is like not even the part that you read.
Oh, really?
So if you get the book, it's not as many pages it actually says it's going to be. It says, I'm trying to see just so everybody knows because it's not as long. It's 217 pages is the actual book, but it ends at 172.
Okay.
So yeah, but
That's
keep
good.
going. Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
So in the book, Megan, really quickly, do they have? He's got these kinds of charts, right?
Yeah. So the charts. So that's the one that I was saying earlier. Was that chart with the measuring backwards at your achievements rather than where you missed out. It's like what Austin says. You don't measure that. That's just to get you there. To get you. I mean, because you have to have. That's the thing. You have to have an idea, or you're not going to go anywhere, right? You can't. If you don't have an ideal, then you're going to just stay put. So you have to have an ideal, but that's not how you measure if you accomplish something.
So I just came to the PDF or whatever, I don't know what they call it in the actual book, but with the audio book where it talks about ideals and how it illuminates the path. And so basically, just like you said, Austin, it's the motivation. And here they say it's that encouragement. The ideal is the encouragement that gives basically like propels you forward, gives you that courage to take the next step that's necessary along the path to get to that destination that you're looking for. So I like that.
What were you saying before, Austin, though? I feel like we veered off
Oh
again.
yeah, no, you're fine. So saying so high achievers, right? They tend to be
Oh yeah.
unhappy, and
Yes.
he likened that process to the hedonic. They'll call it a hedonic treadmill, but the
Oh,
real
yeah. Yeah.
word is hedonic adaptation. And so humans are really good at this. We're really good at this naturally. It's whenever we get something, um, it can be positive or negative, right? Like say you get a promotion at work and you're going to make $200,000 instead of $100,000, whatever the example may be. You're super excited for a very short time, and then you
Mm-hmm.
return back to normal, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the hedonic adaptation is that tendency to return to a normal state after a positive or a negative stimulus, if that makes sense. And so if you're like, I'll just be there as soon as I make this much money
Mhm.
or as soon as I get this position. That tends to be how high achievers think. So, I'll be happy when I get this. And then they get that and they're happy for like a week or, a short period. And so that's, I think the main gist of that is that happiness, he mentions, is something that we have, right? Something that we can do when we're in the game. We can
We can
measure,
find it within ourselves,
yeah,
regardless of the situation that we're in.
yeah, it's not something that we achieve. It's something that we like have
So
to
here's
consciously think about.
So he talked about the football player one. Like this is what comes up to my mind when you guys are talking about this with the football
Yeah.
player. And he says, you don't need anything outside of yourself, right? So like to be happy, you need like it's inside of you rather than, like you're talking about the high achievers. Like if I get this, then I will finally be happy. But that's not necessarily what you need. You need to be okay with yourself first is
Hmm.
essentially what it's coming back to is like your transformation and your improvement rather than getting like this ideal thing. I explained it horribly. He did a better job at it, obviously, in the book, but
What you're saying.
Well, the thing that's really cool about that concept, Megan, is that now we all have power within us. Like we don't have to wait for any sort of external um, influencing factor in our lives. We don't have to wait for somebody to behave a certain way or say a certain thing or get a certain raise or promotion or, reach some sort of achievement or finish a thing. We have that power within us to be happy, regardless of whatever. I know that's really idealistic, but that is something that I've been working on in the last couple of years is learning how to kind of like reclaim that power. And I hate to use the word power, but it really is power when you don't have to give that away to somebody else or to some other thing, that you have the capability to just change your mind and change the way that you feel about things.
Yeah, I definitely call that a power.
yeah.
Super
So
power.
I think like those successful people, right? They're always just reaching for the next thing. And so they never feel successful. They might, like you said, for like a week, right, on that treadmill, but they're off of it within a week because there's a new level. So you just got to train yourself
Hmm.
to be okay with the gain.
So how can you be a high achiever who's constantly, and I think he mentions this in the book a little bit, but I don't remember what he says about it. Be somebody who is always looking, you can see your shortcomings, you can see your weaknesses, you can see those gaps, but they don't like weigh you down, and you can look to the ideals or whatever. Like, how can you be a high achiever and still be happy? I guess is the question.
I
Do
would
you know what I
say
mean?
that
Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah, yeah. I think in the book, doesn't he mention that, recognizing when you're in the gap is, and, kind of calling yourself out on it if you're like complaining or negative or, being very reactive to something that you shouldn't be. It's an easy sign that you're in the gap. And so you can then find he's mentioned just saying a win, right? He'll just say like, okay, well, maybe I failed at this, but but what was the benefit of it?
Mm-hmm.
And he swings it into a positive light, right? And I'd say that if you could, by getting yourself out of the gap, then that is where you find happiness, right? Is that kind of what the book entails?
I think so.
I think so. One of the notes I made for myself that I like kind of goes with this is if you're not regularly reminded of your progress, it's easy to feel unaccomplished, overwhelmed, and not good enough yet. So,
yeah, I think that's a great.
Yeah, if you're
great
not just
takeaway.
looking at, like you were saying, well, what's the progress that I made, even though this didn't turn out the way I wanted it to? Like, what did I learn? But it's harder to switch that when you're not when you're in a bad situation sometimes.
It is hard, and I think it takes intentionality and practice to be able to be in a bad situation, whatever it might be, a difficult challenge, or I don't know. I can think of half a dozen just off the top of my head, but we don't need to go into specifics. But whenever you're in a hard place, how can you intentionally get yourself into the game in that? So, for example, my sister is divorced, not by her choosing. And she got herself to the game in her head, basically, before she signed the papers for the divorce. And
so did she find, obviously in order to do that, you have to, find yourself learning a lesson or, spin it in a positive manner, right?
Yeah. So things that she and I will talk about often is like, oh, here's a silver lining of this awful situation. It's one of my favorite things. One of my sons, one day, he dropped like a bowl of cereal or something. And immediately he went into like, oh, well, gosh, it's such a good thing that it landed, like upside down. So it didn't like explode
everywhere.
And it's a good thing that it was pretty much empty anyway. And it was a good thing. And like, he was pointing out all these things that went right in this dropped bowl.
So he found happiness in his failure there.
Yeah. So he kept saying at least this and at least that. So I call it the at least theory in my world. Like whenever something bad happens, I'm always like, well, at least this good thing has come of it or is a result of it. At least. So it's that silver lining, looking for the good amidst the bad. I think that's the same thing. It's finding yourself in the game instead of in the gap.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said like so many books have this concept, but they say it in a different way.
Yeah.
That it's like, are you out of the box? Or are you in the box? Right.
Exactly.
Like it's exactly this kind of the same thing, but in a different way of thinking of it.
Because we humans need to hear it 1,000 different ways. It's even said, like the Bible talks about this. Just putting it out there. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's been around for millennia. And so we all are, I don't know, challenged, I guess, in a way, to be able to actually live these principles. It takes practice.
Well, I think too, as a society, we've been programmed almost to look at the negative and focus on the negative rather than the positive. So that's why it's harder to focus on the positive. But if you can train yourself on the little things like dropping a bowl of cereal, right, you're going to be more prone to be able to do that on a regular basis with bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the key is training yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Dan Sullivan, he's, kind of the mind. This is his creation here. He's the mastermind behind it. And he mentions especially now, like social media is specifically designed to put us in the gap.
Oh, for sure.
How often are the people we know, I'm on social media every once in a while. I don't tend to like it that much, but it's true, you're always comparing yourself against someone else's life or someone else's, what they have, what they're doing. Yeah.
What vacation they went on, what they had for dinner, right?
Like how they styled their hair,
what their house looks like,
where they live.
Well, so much you're like, oh, they just bought that new side by side. How happy would I be if I could get that side by side?
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Okay, so I want to add a little something here too, because as I've talked with other people who are close to me who are going through difficult things, I've realized a little bit that I think genetically we all have different capabilities, I guess, and perceptions about around this idea of the gap in the gain, like optimism and pessimism, whatever. So like after several conversations, and it's been years of talking with people in these similar situations, where I finally recognized, I think that I have I think I'm blessed with this optimistic outlook, whereas other people naturally come to a situation and look for the problems. And I think, not that one is better than the other, like that person probably is more cautious and more safe and more forward thinking and whatever, and I'm just maybe a little bit airheaded. I don't know, you know what I mean? Just like la 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 la. But I do think that if we can give ourselves a little bit of grace, so to speak, if we are the kind of person who tends to see things from a realistic point of view, no, they don't like to say that they're pessimists, they're realists. But like if you're the kind of person who comes at things with reality in check, then like what is it that you can do? Like you might have to work a little bit harder to see the benefits of things, because you're always keeping yourself safe and looking for the potholes and the things to avoid. Whereas I'm just happy to be riding on my bike, like I'm just cruising along, like who cares? So anyway, I just think that that's something that's important for people to be aware of. Recognize what kind of, like, where you're coming from with this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like too, it's part of where you grew up, how you were raised, but it's also in yourself as well, because everybody's different, totally. Right? But yeah. I think that puts a good play about who's around you, because that can affect things too.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. Totally. I have to say though, when he was talking to his kids about it, so I don't think we mentioned, so Dan Sullivan is the idea behind the gap in the gain, right? And then the Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote the book, because that is how Dan Sullivan does things, is he knows that he doesn't have a talent of writing. He said it before in one of his other books, like, I could have wrote this, but it would have taken me way longer and it wouldn't have been as good if I don't get like an expert almost to do it. So just as a side note with that, but so this is Benjamin Hardy, right? Yeah, Benjamin Hardy, had to make sure. He talks about subtracting yourself from, or things from your life. So I liked this question that he asked his kids, because he said whenever they started complaining about something or had whatever with something, he'd say, well, what if every time we went into the gap, so that's like complaining about something, we took away the thing we were complaining about, and then how would you feel about it? Just to like change the situation of, like you're complaining about your brother, like for this kid, right? Well, what if you didn't have your brother? How would you feel? Would you be sad? Like, so like it puts you in a different perspective of not focusing on like it's like the spoon thing, right? Like not focusing on the one missing spoon, right?
I actually tried this on my kids. We went and we got ice cream and they didn't have the flavor that they wanted. Like, oh man, I wanted this flavor. It's like, okay, well, I guess you don't need this one that you got. And it was funny how quickly, they were very excited about whatever they were able to get, right?
Yeah.
That's perfect.
But at first they were in the gap for sure.
Yeah. I just thought that was a good reminder. Like when you are disappointed in something, like maybe just step back and be like, well, what if I didn't even have this, right? Like, there's times that I'm like, oh, why do I live in Utah? It's so cold. But guess what? I have a house and, like I can be happy, right? Like,
yes, those are some of the things that I think every time we get another blizzard, like what's happening right now. And I think, man, I'm so glad that at least I have a home that shelters me from it, and I have an awesome space heater to keep me warm, like whatever. Yeah. To look at, I guess those, the things you do have, take away what if I didn't have this, what if I didn't have that, then I can be grateful for it.
Yeah.
Instead of taking it for granted.
Yeah. I mean, like, look at it, we're complaining about the snow. Well, what if we didn't have this much snow? That means we'd be more in a drought this year, which sets lots of different things up for
in the summer.
Huge issues, right? So
then maybe we couldn't go boating or, kayaking this summer.
We'd have a greater chance of toxic air. Yeah. So what else did you guys think with this?
I don't know. You guys are bringing up a lot of things that I kind of forgot about. This is why I have to read things more than once.
I like this little quote that he put in here too, because we're kind of just talking about it. It's, your experience is what you choose to focus on. So like your happiness is what you choose to focus on. It's like the ice cream thing that you were just giving an example with, right? They were upset about not getting the flavor rather than focusing on the ice cream itself, right? Yeah. So your experience, your happiness, your gain is focusing on, you can choose what you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on the gain or do you want to focus on the gap?
Yeah. And Dan, you bring up that point too, that Dan talks about in this book. Whenever we think about the past, we recreate it, right? It's not like it.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that exists in, a stone or whatever, right? And so he brought up an interesting point, how two people could go through the same experience and one is crippled and one is empowered by the same experience.
Yes.
And so I can't remember exactly what you said a second ago, but it did remind me of that. It's like,
you choose what to focus on. You choose what to focus on. So you're choosing the bad part or the positive or up. I don't know. I can't remember what his example was of that situation, but yes, you get to choose.
Well, didn't Dan take his group for strategic coach, and didn't he take them on an exercise where he walked them through that, where it's just like your past is just what you've told yourself. It's just a story.
Mm-hmm.
It can change. And they were like, no, it actually happened. No, these things happened. And he walks them through this exercise to show them how our past can change. And so I just find that super fascinating. And it's all about that perception. Again, what is that you're focusing on. So it really, I just do find it so powerful to realize that we can be the authors of our own story, past and future.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So cool.
Oh yeah, his example was about a husband and wife losing a son.
That's right.
And they could have focused on that, and like it could have ruined their marriage. It could have, lots of things, but because they
chose to live their life better.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not even like the only thing that happened for this family, right? Like I'm just giving like the starting point, and they decided at the beginning, like they were saying, this could ruin us if they don't look at it in a certain way. And I mean, they had some major tragedy even after that. So, and he goes into that too, but like we won't go into that. But there's
keep going. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say that other example that Ben shares with his friend who got divorced, also against his will, and how he chose to look at it, like, I'm so grateful it gave me these 3 kids, and he doesn't hold any bitterness against his ex-wife and treats that time that he had in the marriage to her as a gift in his life and a blessing. And I think that the stories and the examples that they gave in the book are varied enough that we can all find some application that works for us.
So I love this too, since we're jumping into this. He talks about in here, I wrote something down though, in here. I was going to try to find it, but what it says here is like they were kind of playing it safe, this family too, right? Like we all kind of do, right? We kind of hold back, and I knew it's scary, right? Things are scary, but he said that what they decided during at this time was that they weren't going to wait on the sidelines to live their dreams anymore.
I love that.
So, and they saw that time was fine. Like finite, right?
Finite.
And
you don't know when your time person
and
is going to be.
That's what they said. And there's no one knows how long they're going to be here. So they never played it scared again. They just lived out their life and tried to find happiness and as many things, because life is too short, and to hold all those things in rather than, and I think that's a good reminder is, we're only here for so much time and we don't know when that time is. I mean, you never know, right?
Right.
I think we've experienced that firsthand.
Yes, we have.
For sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna cry, but go ahead, guys.
No.
Very personal.
If you do, then you're gonna make
so.
me. Don't do that.
Austin knows this because he's family, but we've had that experience in our own family where a family member passed away very suddenly. No clue, right, Austin?
Yeah.
And it was a good reminder that you only get one life. You never know when your day is going to be. So live it and don't hold back. So sorry.
I love that that reminder, because there were a couple years ago when I was living so much in the gap, like I was burrowed deep in the gap, and I felt like everything in my life. And it wasn't like I was in a depression or anything, but I just saw a lot of things that were scary, or that I was worried about, or that weren't going right, or weren't serving me, or whatever it was. And I had to make a conscious decision at that point to stop living in fear. And that's what that reminds me of. That family, they didn't live in fear or doubt or worry or waiting on some future distant, like maybe kind of situation. They chose to embrace the now, and to just, like Megan's awesome business name that she doesn't think she loves, but 2 feet first, like just jump in and go playful out. Because what do you have to lose? You guys, like, I just got feedback on a big scary thing that I did, and some people loved what I did and some people hated it, and it's super easy to just be like crushed. It's actually kind of the first time that I've gotten negative feedback on something that I'm pursuing, and it was hard, but the cool thing about it is I can take it and say, wow, okay, so clearly I either wasn't for that person, or B, I have room that I can improve. Like, now I know where my shortcomings were, because maybe I didn't know before and somebody had the courage to point it out to me. So if I'm open to hearing that, then I can have this more enriched life. We all can.
Can be a lot more painful, but a lot of times that negative feedback is actually the most beneficial.
Yes.
Yeah, true. Something I wrote down was bet on yourself.
Bet on yourself. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not going to bet on yourself, who is?
Right?
Yeah, no one else will.
And another thing that I wrote down was stop sabotaging your feeling of success by only looking to the future. Don't forget to look back at where you were before. So like basically you're sabotaging where you could be because you're not focusing backwards.
Yeah. You're not measuring backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that I had on that sideline quote that I gave a little bit ago was, no one can make your dreams happen but you. I mean, that's essentially what we're coming to, right? Like, you're the only one that can do it. So are you willing to?
You're the only one who knows what that ideal is.
Right? Well, and it changes. Like I had that too down here. Where is it? There is more than one path to a dream. Don't get stuck on trying to decide the perfect one. Pick a path and readjust along the way. You will find the perfect path, but it'll be different than you imagined. It will be better.
Yeah, I just actually listened to a training the other day where the lady was talking about how her everybody talks about their big why, right? And she says, my why, I've evolved over time. What was my why in the beginning is completely different from what my why is now, because I have gone through different stages of life. I have different purposes. I have different, goals and targets, and it can change.
So that brings us back then to Austin, your question about successful business owners not feeling successful. Is it because they were so focused on this one thing, but they had evolved through it all that they didn't even realize that they had reached a different point? Does that make sense? Your why changes, but they didn't change it. So they didn't see it as success because they didn't change with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. Or they didn't realize, exactly how far they've come to, so they just feel like they're stuck.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about that. Yeah, right.
It could be so many things, because maybe they're the kind of person that isn't willing to take that hard feedback. And so they keep making the same mistakes or getting stuck in the same rut. And so are they the kind of person who's willing to learn from a situation? Or are they just going to see, I had what other people will call a failure last fall, Megan knows. And I chose to not look at it as a failure. I chose to look at it as a learning experience. And
yeah, the only way to have it be a real failure is if you didn't learn anything from it, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, 1,000%.
Well, I mean, if you think about the most successful people, they're the ones, if they're truly successful, they're the ones that accept the failures. They accept them because they know what it brings them.
I'm interested, Stephanie, what did you learn from this experience?
Oh, well, I mean, just so many things. Basically, it boils down to, just like I said at the beginning, how to measure success. So something that I've been working on a lot, for example, in my business is tracking metrics better. And Megan's been working with me. She's been helping me on some things where I've been able to, once you analyze kind of the metrics of the thing, then you kind of get a bigger picture. And like I said, I'm such an optimistic person that it's easy for me to just kind of keep going on blindly and being happy in the situation. And it's having that dose of reality actually is propelling me forward. I don't even feel like I'm in a gap having that dose of reality, because it's giving me information that will help me to keep building and growing. So I don't know. I think.
Well, I must say too, Stephanie, because that failure that you're talking about, we were talking about it the other day again, because you're up against a new, you're trying something again, right?
Yeah.
But you were telling me just the other day, that failure has actually put you in an easier position for this portion. And that's the step that you needed to take to get to this next phase. So I just as a side note, this failure, you're also has set you up for a better spot than
totally,
than what you and you're seeing it. I think that's the key, is you're seeing that, oh, you know what, I did, that helped me get to here, rather than
changing your perception, just like you talked about, Austin, with what our ideals are, what our expectations are. Actually, I was just thinking about this, I think this morning, where it's just what are our expectations? And that's usually when people are disappointed, is when they have expectations, especially uncommunicated, unvoiced expectations. If they just have these expectations in their heads and they don't communicate it to the people that might be players in this game, then they'll probably be disappointed, So it's meeting those expectations and working with the tools and the resources that you have. Yeah. Setting yourself up for the next best thing. Appreciate
Dan Sullivan also in the book, he also said that he tries to fail more than anyone else. Right? He said that. Yeah, he brought it up. He said basically failures, like you said, you learn lessons or they put you in a position for something new. But by being someone who fails, that means that you're good enough to play. if that makes sense. And so people who, and everyone fails, they always um, find some sort of stumbling point. But if you keep going, then that means that you're good enough to keep playing the game.
Yes.
So
was it
it's
in this
funny.
book where they talked about like this guy losing millions during the crash? Was that this book? I'm
It
trying to
was,
remember. That was that example, right?
yeah, he lost like $3 million before lunch on the
Yeah,
crash
and
of
Oh, yeah.
he said that like after that point, like this failure made him realize where they had some misalignments, and so they adjusted it and they like skyrocketed
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
their
and it's
success because of the one failure. And I mean, that's a huge, scary failure, right?
Yeah.
That's not anything little. Like it was a ton of money. And he was saying like he was like sick and like, like, oh my gosh.
he looked
Imagine.
pale and he was physically ill from this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, you mentioned that his entire business changed, and everything they're working on today is from that moment. They made hundreds of $1 million off of
This one failure
this
that
one
was like
pivot.
huge though. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
but he could have just taken it and not changed anything, and then they would have been probably out of business, right?
Right. Yeah.
probably.
So, that's a good reminder too when things happen. How can you pivot? How
Mm-hmm.
can how can you take it and run with it in a better way?
Mm-hmm.
Just like Stephanie did.
Right.
Getting there, working on it.
I'm excited to learn what your different direction is, Stephanie.
Yeah, me too.
She'll tell us when she's out of it.
I'm looking back always. Don't worry.
That's right.
All right. What's the final wrap then? Final thoughts.
Anything, Austin?
Yeah, I would say, just
Beginning.
for a final thought here, I'd just say something that I got out of the end is that just pursue your ideals, then it does delay the happiness. And it always puts it as like it's always up ahead or around the corner, wherever
Just
else,
out of reach, right?
just out of reach, just like the horizon, right? So when you can find a way to measure your progress, where you've come from, um, and still use your ideal as a motivation, I think that that's going to be the big takeaway from this book, or at least it was for me. I don't know about your guys' big takeaway, but
I mean, my everything that I kind of like really set into me was don't let distractions, challenges, or setbacks derail you because you have important things to work on. Find another path. There's always more than one.
yeah.
That's essentially what I took from it is,
Did you write that down?
yeah, I did. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That came from me.
Awesome. So we've got 2 quotes, Megan. I expect you to share them with us.
I actually have so many quotes from this. I'll be sharing all of them. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's the cool
Awesome.
thing. The PDFs are just full of quotes. It's super.
Well, no, it's more like I read something and it's what I think. And that's what I was like, I need to start doing that more with the books that we read rather than like later on, you look back and you're like, okay, I had a really good thought, but I didn't write it down in that moment because it's hard to pause an audio. But as you're reading, you can pause and hurry and write it down.
So we all need to share one quote with each book.
Ooh, I like that.
I actually got thinking about that. I was like, I want to buy a specific notebook for these meetings and then have all these notes as part of like, it's almost like a book journal. I call it that.
So I did it in my notes in my phone because then I can take it with me wherever I go.
Yeah.
But then it's like on the cloud too at the same time because you could do it as like a Google Doc or.
And Megan and I actually have a Google Sheet that has a place for quotes, so we could share it with Austin.
Yeah, we should share it with you. But I like the idea though, like it's like call it like your little black book, Austin, of quotes.
I like it. That's awesome.
Yes.
Stephanie, what's your takeaway before we get off here?
Oh, I think I've already said my basics. So I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think though this was like the perfect segue into this one based off the other ones. We were just like really in the mindset of it. And I think that's maybe why it was like this was amazing, right?
It was amazing. Yep.
So.
I apparently need repetition. So that's good.
I was honestly thinking
too.
like these 4 books, those, or maybe even if you take like just the one of the leadership and self-deception one because it's so short, and this one because it's short too. But if you reread these on a regular basis, I think we would benefit
or just listen to it on repeat so that you constantly had the ideas being.
Yeah, you probably could start like quoting everything.
Well, it's funny too, because I drive a lot, right? Like I drive a decent amount, which is why I can listen to these so many times. But I can tell a distinct difference when I listen to the book on the way and how my day goes throughout work and the actions that I take versus days that I just like try to listen to music on the way up. It's 100% different.
Totally.
Well, I think you're getting that positive, like it's like that positive reinforcement, that positive, you're looking.
It's just a reminder.
Yeah, it's a reminder of like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to do that today. And I'm very quick to forget things. So by the next day, like
maybe you need like 10 minutes before you get to work. Like every 10 minutes you're going to
Yeah. Yeah, I need at least 10 minutes of something positive to help me be better in the day.
Yeah. I think we all do. So not why they tell you to like read your scriptures and all that fun stuff. So
yeah, that makes sense.
To give you in a better mindset before you start your day. It makes sense. It's like meditating.
It makes perfect sense. Yes.
Like they all come together doing the same thing. So
yeah.
Awesome.